I wish I had a lightsaber. Star Wars has been one of my favorite franchises since I was young, and to this day, I always look forward to all the new releases of movies, shows, and games. Ironically, while the main focus of Star Wars is the movies, and nowadays the shows as well, if it weren't for the video games, I may have never gotten into the franchise like I have. However, for a period of time, it felt like the Star Wars games fell out of existence, and even though I was initially excited for the new Battlefronts, they didn't really click with me like the older Star Wars games did from my childhood. When Jedi Fallen Order came out, it finally felt like a Star Wars game that was both modern, but had the heart of some of the older games. While it was a hard one, I did enjoy it nonetheless, and it was fun playing a former Jedi Padawan having to relearn his abilities and grow stronger. So, I was certainly interested in Jedi Survivor when it was revealed, and I have to say, it definitely surpasses the original in my mind and felt like an amazing Star Wars experience. This game is very much a continuation of the previous game, both in plot and in gameplay. It starts off a few years after the original, with Cal still fighting the Empire, and it definitely feels like playing the first game again, especially since you start off with the abilities unlocked from the last game. They didn't try and change up what they did in Fallen Order, and instead expanded on it, which I think worked out great. One thing I immediately noticed is that the load times in this one are much faster, which was one of my complaints with the previous game, as every time I died in that one, it would take like a minute to load back in. Granted, this probably has to do with the fact I played this on the much more powerful PS5, while the previous was on my PS4. This game took me 32 hours and 26 minutes to complete, which is about 10 hours longer than Fallen Order took me. This is probably due to the fact this game has a lot more side content in it, so while I didn't do all of it, it probably made it longer for me to finish the story. Like the first game, the lightsaber combat is the main focus of the action, and it's definitely what draws you in. Admittedly, like most Star Wars games, the lightsaber is definitely underpowered compared to the movies, as with some tougher enemies, it definitely seems like you're hitting them with a pool noodle, but that's understandable for balancing purposes. Besides its underpowered nature, it's a lot of fun to wield it around and feels like a powerful weapon regardless, especially against weaker enemies like stormtroopers and battle droids, as it generally takes 1 or 2 hits to take them out. I like how, unlike the previous game, this one didn't shy away from dismembering human enemies too, which certainly made it feel more accurate and immersive for the lightsaber to cut off legs and arms. I also like how this game has scenarios where it throws a lot of weaker enemies at you at once, so you can just go ham and mow down the horde. More lightsaber options are available in this sequel too. In the first game, you had 2 styles you could use, the classic single blade and the double-bladed lightsaber, which both return immediately at the beginning of this game. In addition to these, this game adds 3 more options for you to try out and play with. One is dual-wielding lightsabers, which I definitely utilize a bit in the early game, and is good for very aggressive and offensive playstyles. Another option is to wield a blaster with your lightsaber, which gives you more range in fights. Admittedly, this was my least used playstyle though, so I didn't use it too much. The last one they give you is the crossguard lightsaber, which is the most powerful of the bunch and has good defense, but as a consequence, it's the slowest one in attacks. The game only allows you to have 2 styles equipped at once though, so once I unlocked them all, the 2 I largely stuck with were the double lightsaber and the crossguard. I felt these gave me a nice balance of speed and crowd control with the double lightsaber, and powerful hits with the crossguard for tougher enemies. Seeing these 2 styles are opposite extremes, there were a couple situations I had to use the single blade to help out with some fights. Even though it's easy to switch the style you use at any save point and workbench, I feel the way the upgrade system is, it's best to stick to 2 main styles so your upgrade points aren't too spread out between the styles you aren't using as much. I kinda wish the game allowed you to have at least 1 more style equipped at a time to give you more options to switch between during combat, kind of like God of War Ragnarok with its 3 weapons. That said, the limitation of how many styles you can use at once definitely can add replay value for additional playthroughs, since you can play around with the different combos you use. The customization of your lightsaber is greatly expanded in this game too. Unlike the first game, where you only have 2 or 3 options at the start, you have pretty much all the blade color options from the get-go. You can customize each of the individual pieces too, and the color and material of each part. And as you progress, you can find even more parts, so you can constantly adjust your saber throughout the game and make it unique to you. Most of these are fine details you really won't be noticing unless you pay close attention, and it's purely cosmetic, but it's definitely a fun feature to mess around with. In addition to lightsaber customization, the amount you can customize Cal is greatly expanded on too. In the previous game, you could customize his poncho, the ship, and BD-1, but in this game, all the customization is in even more detail. The different parts of Cal's outfits can be adjusted, as well as his haircut and beard, and each piece of BD-1 can be customized too. All these customizations are minor things, but it really helps make the characters feel your own. I like how the game automatically gives you the force abilities you had to unlock in the previous game, like force push and force pull. I feel like a lot of sequels will find ways to make you have to re-unlock skills from the previous game, which can be a bit of a bummer, especially when no explanation is given. The fact this game gives you it all at the beginning tutorial makes you feel like you're picking up where you left off at the end of the last adventure, and you can see Cal has continued to grow stronger in the years between. Which, starting at this point, definitely made me wonder how much stronger those abilities would get as I played, and what new ones you unlock through your adventure. Which, as I progressed, it was fun powering up the skills I liked the most to be more powerful, and testing out the new ones I got. Since Cal is a stronger Jedi now in this game than he was in Fallen Order, the game definitely changes the difficulty balance a bit to reflect this. Like most modern games, you can select a difficulty level at the beginning, and like I almost always do, I went with the normal difficulty option. I remember finding the first game to be pretty difficult, which makes sense, since even though Cal was trained as a Jedi, he never finished his training as a Padawan and disconnected himself with the Force, and forgot much of what he learned during the years he was in hiding. This game takes a different approach, and wants to make you feel like Cal has indeed grown, and returning enemies from the first game are definitely not as difficult as they were when you fought them in that game. Some of the challenging design does return though, like having to get your experience points back from the enemy that killed you, or risk losing them. And the game does introduce some stronger enemies too, to still give you the difficulty and precise timing you experienced in the first game. This game doesn't make it feel like each encounter is a struggle though, and has a balance of both fun and challenging combat encounters. For most of the story levels, I didn't struggle much, and if I did die, I was generally able to get past whatever killed me when I returned the next attempt. However, there were a couple boss fights that did take me many attempts to get through, and definitely had me on edge. Most of the boss fights I could get past the first try though, which I can't say the same in my experience with the first game. In turn, it definitely felt like they saved the more difficult portions for the side quests, which I didn't get to all the side bosses, but I did enough where I could definitely feel the jump in brutality of them. The exploration of the planets you go to in this game is definitely similar to how it was in the previous games too, where it very much has a Metroidvania feel to it. The areas on these planets have a combo of linear portions and more open areas where exploration is more possible. Lots of areas are blocked off at first that you can return to later once you get the proper ability or upgrade, which definitely entices exploring to find new hidden upgrades and customization options later in the game. While still not the greatest, the map of the areas you can view is definitely a bit better than the previous games too, which I remember I thought that was absolutely awful, especially when I had to go get the Platinum Trophy. This game also has a couple planets where the open areas are way larger, and to help explore these, they gave Cal the ability to tame the wildlife and use them to help traverse the landscape. My favorite were the ostrich-like creatures that I'm pretty sure were just straight up chocobos from Final Fantasy. Besides when they are first introduced in the story, only the flying ones are frequently used during the main quest, while the rest are really only there for exploration. There's definitely a lot more side content in this game than there was in the first one too. I admittedly didn't try and do it all this time like I did the first game, since I wasn't feeling like going for the Platinum Trophy, but I did dabble with a lot of the side content. Much of the side content revolves around the saloon in the game, where you can interact with the characters there. As you progress, both through the story and the side content, more characters will go there, opening up new side quests and conversations, and it really helps build the world. There's a lot you can do there, like build a fish tank, make a garden on the roof, and my favorite was holo tactics. I love strategy games, so it was fun to play around with the different combos you could do. The minigame is a bit on the simple side, but I'd love to see this maybe get expanded on in the future in either the sequel or as a game of its own. There's a lot of bosses spread out throughout the world, which are definitely fun to find and sometimes are more challenging than a lot of the main story bosses are. There's also these force tears that give you a specific challenge to overcome in its own little realm. Some of these require you to use a particular lightsaber stance, some test your mastery of the traversal systems, and others just throw an extreme amount of enemies at you. There's definitely a lot you can do in this game outside of the story, and lots of hidden lore, character development, and challenges are awaiting you if you want to search out and find them. I won't delve too deep into the specifics of the story, since I don't want to spoil things, but I definitely enjoyed it. It's a bit smaller scale this time, as the fight with the Empire takes a bit more of a back seat for large portions of the game, and they're mostly just a background threat. However, the story is more personal, as Cal is losing hope in his fight with the Empire, and starts to doubt himself as he fights the darkness that is starting to arise in him from all the losses he's had to endure. There's a lot of mystery in the plot too, as you try and piece together why Cal's friends all went their separate ways in the years between, and as you wonder what went down with the situation with the hidden planet Tanalorr during the High Republic era. In addition to the characters from the previous game, there's new characters introduced too that you'll get to know and get attached to. And there may even be some cameos from other more well-known Star Wars characters as well. The story definitely feels like a solid middle point, and I'm excited to see where it'll go in the following game and how much it might connect to the rest of the Star Wars universe. I do have some minor nitpicks with the game. Like in the first one, there can be some visual glitches with some of the more scripted events that I generally find funny, and they aren't game-breaking. Granted, even games considered masterpieces like God of War have glitches sometimes. So this is just a little nitpick since it just popped up a little more than usual. One thing that really caught my eye was how big the file size was for the game. Like, what? It took up so much space on my PS5, and I'm not even sure what this game did to get a size that big. It kind of is part of what discouraged me from doing more side content, since I wanted it off my system ASAP after the story to get more room on there. These aren't major issues and didn't ruin the experience of the game for me at all though. I definitely would say Star Wars Jedi Survivor is the best Star Wars game we've gotten in many years. It surpasses Jedi Fallen Order in pretty much every way, and is definitely a successful sequel. That said, I definitely suggest playing the first game before this, as Survivor is very much a continuation of that one's story, and you might not be as invested in the characters and growth Cal will have through this game if you play this first. But I definitely would recommend these games if you are a Star Wars fan and or a fan of action games. Admittedly, you may want to turn down the difficulty to an easier level if you're afraid of the challenge of this game too. This game definitely is successful at both giving you some challenge and letting you live out your fantasy as playing as a Jedi, which, let's be honest, pretty much all us fans have wished could happen. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed. I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences with the game in the comments. And if you want to see more from me, definitely force push that subscribe button, and I'll be seeing more of you soon.
Right between the eyes. Won't stop. Wait. Fight this. Good call.